Everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series, Great Players of the Past. Robert Huebner, who, as some of you know, passed away 2 months ago today, actually. He was 76. I want to thank our sponsor, Timon Bauer. And Timon has, Mr. Bauer has a long message, which I have to read. I can't remember it all. I would like to dedicate the lecture to my grandfather, Klaus, who unfortunately passed away 3.5 years ago. Without his insistence many years ago, I would never have learned the game of chess. When he passed away, I was actually playing in a tournament, and the next day I blew away a 2114 moves with the black pieces to cross the 1900 barrier for the first time in my life. Since that day, I imagine he watches over my games from some other place. Thanks, Mr. Bauer. I'm sure he is watching over you. And the sponsor of the lecture has actually played Robert Huebner twice in simultaneous exhibitions. And we're going to look at one of the games that he played against Huebner in the Simul in 2019, which was 6 years ago. Huebner was a German grandmaster. Unlike most grandmasters, he had another job. He was a papyrologist. He studied unknown languages at the professor level. And when I'm from Michigan originally, and in the early 80s, Huebner was actually at University of Michigan. That's our sponsor. Welcome to our sponsor. And Huebner was in Michigan when I lived in Michigan, but he didn't do any chess. He was a residing scholar at the University of Michigan in papyrology. And I have a few funny Huebner stories personally. One of them is a friend of mine from Belgium. He was playing in the European Team Championship, and he was having lunch, and everybody had lunch, and Huebner was at his table, and Huebner started speaking to him in Dutch with no Dutch accent. And the guy said to Huebner, "How do you speak Dutch? And how do you speak with no accent? You're German." And Huebner replied, "Dutch is easy. I learned it in a week. Unknown Chinese dialects, those are hard." So Huebner spoke many languages. He learned them quite easily. And in 1979, which it lists in his Wikipedia article, he was at the Super Tournament in Montreal, which had Karpov and Tal and Timon and Larson and other strong players, Kovalik, I think Hort. Anyway, I was 9 years old, and we lived in Michigan, and my dad drove us to Montreal to watch a couple rounds of the tournament. We stopped in Toronto on the way to visit relatives. Anyway, when we were in Montreal, at some point, my dad drove to what he said was the nicest hotel in Montreal to see if he would see any of the players, like in the lobby, like hanging out. And one player we did see was Huebner, and my dad talked to Huebner for a few minutes about chess. So that was interesting. And then at a tournament in the Netherlands, I think it was Wijkanzee, I was speaking to Huebner, and they had a closing ceremony with live music, which I didn't have a ticket to. I was trying to get in, but I couldn't get in. Huebner didn't go. He didn't show up at the closing ceremony. And he said, "Oh, I would have given you my ticket if I knew you wanted it. I don't go where there's live music. I don't like live music." So Huebner didn't like live music. Then he was telling me about a game he played against a player who said wasn't very good. And I guess Huebner couldn't win or had trouble winning. And I said to him, "Even bad players can play good sometimes." And he replied, "No, they can't." So he was a funny guy, whether he knew it or not. Huebner played in many candidates tournaments and matches, and was getting close to playing for the World Championship. The closest he was he lost quarterfinal to Smyslov, where the match was drawn, and they had a spin of the roulette wheel, which Wikipedia doesn't mention, landed on 0, so nobody won. Then they had to spin it again. And Huebner wasn't even there for the roulette wheel because he thought that was stupid. And he also had other candidates matches in different years in the 70s and 80s where he wasn't able to win and play for the World Championship. But he was rated 3rd in the world at his peak in 1980, I believe, or 81. And in the 70s, he did well in interzonal and candidates tournaments. He was the best player in West Germany and then Germany later, probably for about 30 years, I would say. He was a perfectionist, and when he annotated games, Huebner was famous for writing lots and lots and lots of variations. Lots of variations. More than any other grandmaster. And a grandmaster once said to him, like, don't you know nobody reads those variations? There's too many. And he said, I don't do it for people reading it. I know they don't read it. I do it for myself. So his annotations have lots of variations if you're interested in looking at any of his games that he annotated. He won many tournaments in his career. He was also Nigel Short's second at the World Championship. Short Kasparov in 93. He worked with Nigel. He won the silver medal in the Olympiad for the German team. They won the silver medal in 2000. But he never really considered himself a professional chess player because he was an academic. And in my opinion, his Wikipedia article is lacking. It should probably be 3 or 4 times as long as it is. Huebner played many world champions, drawing and winning against many, including beating Kasparov in a game that I've known for a while, in King's Indian. And Huebner was just like a solid board 1 for the German chess team. He was always board 1. He was always the best player. And eventually he stopped playing chess much because he got older and wasn't participating in German chess anymore at a certain age. So a great player in the 70s and 80s and maybe the late 60s. A great scholar and very serious person who was very serious about chess when he played, but when he wasn't playing, he was busy doing other academia. So he had time in his life to do, I guess, different things that he was world class at, because he was world class in his field also. Okay, so let's go to the Simul game. This is from our sponsor, Timon Bauer. Bauer was black. I guess Huebner took white in the Simul games, which is what typically the Simul givers do. They take the white pieces. And this was the second Simul, which Mr. Bauer, our sponsor, was able to play Huebner in 2019. So I guess Huebner was about 70 at the time, but still giving simultaneous exhibitions. And just from looking at this one game, I can tell Huebner took his Simul play very seriously, because it looks like a slow game. It looks like a normal opening, normal play from Huebner that I would expect against another grandmaster. And a lot of times when I'm giving a Simul, I'm playing fast and loose, and I'm playing openings I don't normally play, and I'm trying to get my opponent out of book really quickly, and I'm playing sort of weird. But it looks like Huebner took his Simul giving very seriously. Okay, so Mr. Bauer played the Caro-Kann. Huebner has white. Huebner played the advanced variation, which is the most testing. Bishop f5 is the mean move. And this variation in the 80s and 90s was named after Nigel Short because he was playing it a lot with white. And that's funny because Huebner worked with Short for his match with Kasparov. So it's funny he's playing the Short variation. Okay, knight d7, one of the moves, castles, knight e7. Now, if this was Bughouse, which probably Huebner never played, white would play knight d6 checkmate. Very suspicious. If you don't know what Bughouse is, that joke isn't too funny. But if you do know, then it's okay. Okay, Huebner played bishop e3, trying to make c5 less palatable for black. And black played c5 anyway. Mr. Bauer gave annotations with the moves h6 and bishop g6 as alternatives. Huebner played c4. So white wants to open the center since white's castled and black hasn't. And this position, black made a mistake. Black took on d4. Black should take on c4 instead, and then a6. This is a line Mr. Bauer gives and says that white is slightly better in this position. And of course, there's a lot of theory in these lines because this line is still popular today. C takes d4, knight takes d4. Now white's knight is super strong on d4. And black's position is very risky to open up the center like this because his king is on e8. If he takes the pawn on e5, the sacrificed pawn, which he didn't do, then takes on d5. And now white's threatening bishop b5 check, which is quite annoying. E takes d5, bishop b5, queen a4. You can see black's king is not good. The e file's open. White has the two bishops. White has pressure here. So this is very dangerous. So instead, black played bishop g6, knight c3. Black can take two pawns. White just develops, though. And then knight b6 is the losing move. A couple lines he gives are dc4, bishop takes c4, knight c6, sacrifice on e6. And white has an initiative for a piece with black's king on e8. Also possible is knight takes e5. Bishop b5 check again. And white has an attack against black's king, obviously. Black's king isn't well placed on e8. Knight b6 was the losing move. C takes d5. Now, Mr. Bauer didn't want to take with the pawn because e6 is very annoying. You can see, again, black's king isn't very good. Black's not even up material. So he took with the knight. If he takes with the other knight, that's even worse because bishop b5 check is completely winning. The game's over already. So he took with the e knight, then play king e7. He could also play knight d7, pinning his own knight. Then takes, e6. Knight e6, and white has a winning attack against black's king. White hasn't sacrificed anything. So black thought it was the lesser of two evils to play king e7. Black's position's so bad that he was forced to break my rules and play f6. Never play f6. He could have played knight f6, but that's probably worse. So f6 it is. Now, Mr. Bauer says queen g4 is a stronger move than what Huebner played, threatening queen takes e6 checkmate. Knight c7, rook e1, queen c8, defending the e6 pawn. Rook c1, And this position is winning for white. White has big attack against black's king. Instead, Huebner played queen e2, which is not as good. Of course, white is still threatening mate. Knight c7. Rook d1, sacrificing the bishop. Taking the bishop was the correct move, which was not played. Queen e5, threatening the rook. Black just ignores it and plays king f7. Queen takes rook, bishop g7. And black's down the exchange and just has to play this position with the two bishops. But instead, black played queen c8, which is too passive. Bishop f4. Now white's threatening. Bishop takes. c7, and then e6 isn't protected. So knight d5, knight d5, knight d5, bishop g3. You can see that black's losing with black's terrible king on e7. Bishop f7, rook c1. Now, black said he thought of resigning because his queen's trapped. He only has one square for his queen, and that allows mate in one, but he did it anyway because he thought the mate was cute. But you could see the queen's attacked, and it doesn't have any squares to go to, except for d8. And unfortunately, after queen d8, knight f5 is checkmate, also known as knife f5. I wonder if Huebner knew about knife f5. Well, he does now. Also, in a complete aside that has nothing to do with this lecture, I had a dream last night, and I was back in time with my dad, and we were at a chess tournament, and Huebner was playing, and I was watching Huebner's game, and I knew that he had passed away just now, but we went back in time so we could watch him play again. And he wasn't the only player in the tournament, but he was the one that was in my dream. And I wanted to tell him, you know, that we're from the future and we're coming back here to watch you play and so forth. But I never got a chance to. So even in my dreams, I'm watching Huebner crush people. So that was a very incisive game from Huebner. He opened up the center. He got all his pieces out. He attacked mercilessly, and he ended up winning quickly against our sponsor. So thanks to our sponsor for submitting this game and letting us see a brilliant Huebner victory in a simultaneous exhibition. Okay. Now we'll get to the Grandmaster on Grandmaster fighting. This game was played in Brussels in 1986. Huebner was white. Lajos Portisch was black. Portisch, another great player of the past, although Portisch is still alive, but he doesn't play chess anymore. Portisch is one of the oldest grandmasters in the world. He's top 10 for sure, or he's top 5. I think he's 80. He's either 87 or 88. Let's see. He's 80. Carry the 1. He's 87. He'll be 88 next month. He was born one day before my dad. Same year, one day before. Portisch was. Okay, this was played in 86 when both players were still quite strong. Huebner played e4 just like he did in the Simul game. And they got a Ruy Lopez closed variation. This is the main line. Bishop b7, rook e8, Zaitsev variation, played by Karpov a lot. Bishop f8. There's a lot of Kasparov-Karpov games in these lines. And they got really blocked up position with some maneuvering. Portisch decided to open the C file, which didn't turn out to be a good decision for him. He probably was worried he'd get mated on the king side, so he wanted to open file on the queen side. but you can see how passive black's position is. Once again, just like in our Simul game, Huebner has knife f5. Huebner takes over the c file. Huebner really takes over the c file. f3 is a really cool move, which you should never play. He just wants to walk his king up for the endgame, because pieces are going to be traded on c7 eventually. Then he forces the trade. And black is very passive, doesn't have any active play. And this position, black found a really creative move, bishop c4, to get counterplay against the b3 pawn. And if you take the bishop, then the b pawn is queening. And Huebner ended the game in one move, which is pretty impressive, because bishop c4 looks like a move that somebody would overlook, but that wasn't the case at all. Huebner saw bishop c4, but knew that he was winning with the next move. Can anybody in our live audience find out what Huebner played in this position? If you're watching on YouTube later, you can type it in. Make sure you type it in after I show you so your answer is correct. Everybody's quiet in the live audience. So white played the move.
Actually,
Yes.
rook d8 check, king e7. Oh wait, I was about to suggest d6, but that hangs to rook. Never mind.
Yeah, but you're still right, because you're the sponsor. Yeah, rook d8 check is correct. And now black resigned, because if black plays king e7, white has a brilliant move, rook c8. So that attacks the bishop. And if the bishop takes on b3, then we play your d6 check, and we win the bishop on b3. So after rook c8, black is just losing. Also winning is rook h8. But rook c8 is probably nicer, because the bishop takes b3, d6 check. Yeah, rook h8 also winning. Then black has to play king d6. Now, probably taking wins, because white has this checkmating attack, which somebody pointed out on the internet. Not sure if that's forced, but it's pretty cool. So rook d8 check is the winning move. Rook h8 wins, rook c8 wins. And also, black's not threatening to take on b3 anymore because of d6 check, so rook a8 probably wins. Forcing the king to e7 is funny because it stops bishop takes b3 because we have d6 check. But I like rook c8 because it threatens the bishop. So a beautiful win by Huebner. Portisch never had any counterplay. I feel bad for Portisch. This feels like a game that Karpov won, in his prime, when he was white in these Rui Lopez's and taking over the offense of the game. Okay, the next one is against Vlastimil Jansa. This was played in a Zonal tournament in Athens in 1969. Huebner's black. Jansa was a Czech grandmaster. I guess in 69 it was Czechoslovakia. Then later he was Czech. Funny story about me. I've played miniature golf with Jansa. Jansa, Epishin, me, and somebody else. Who was the fourth person? I think it was an FM from Belgium. Okay, so actually that wasn't Jansa, that was Placheka. That was close. Okay, so French defense from Huebner. Jansa plays like King's Indian attack. Huebner trades everything and plays for bishop c5 and e5. So black's down a tempo because black played e6 and e5. But white's play is very slow, so black doesn't mind. Black gains space on the queen side. Now black wants to play bishop a6 with a skewer. Knight c4, pinning his own knight. Queen d7. Huebner wants to play queen e6. Knight h4. Queen g4. If queen e6, I guess white can play b3. Queen g4, bishop f3, b3, b5, forcing the trade. Now black wants to play a4 and soften up white's position here. This pin seems pretty nasty. Now the game got super sharp after rook d5. And you can see all the pieces are hanging. And as the game continues, all the pieces are still hanging. There's a lot of hanging pieces this game. So Jansa sacrificed the exchange because he's attacking both bishops with a skewer. Huebner takes. Now Jansa is forking the queen and the knight. So queen f6, giving up the knight. b4. I guess if you take this and I take on b3, this is a very nasty pin. So he plays b4 first. Then e4, which lets the queen go to c3 and attacks the bishop on e4. Queen takes e4. Rook e8 attacking the queen. Rook e1 check. Knight e5. And the idea is we're attacking the queen, and if the knight takes on e5, we have bishop f1 check. So white played queen h5. All the pieces are still hanging. The knight's hanging on c4. The bishop's hanging on c5. Bishop takes, threatening bishop f1 check. Bishop g5. Now that attacks the queen and it attacks the rook. And now if you play bishop f1 and I move my king, bishop h3 isn't checkmate because white has rook takes rook. So Huebner sacrificed his queen. Rook takes h8, a1. Bishop takes queen. Now the idea is, with the queen and bishop lined up, if you check and play discovered check, I have bishop to d1 because my queen defends my bishop. So Huebner did check and then took the bishop on f3. Now black's threatening bishop h3 checkmate. So he plays c4, attacking the rook on a1. So now if the black bishop on f1 moves, white plays bishop takes rook. So he takes the bishop. And Jansa resigned. So another brilliant game from Huebner where all the pieces were hanging, but he had the big mating attack, ended up sacrificing his queen, and black has way too many pieces, plus black has the mating attack. And white just has the one check and then king h8. And queen takes knight, gets mated to bishop h3. Bishop e2 check is also winning, but okay. Black has many winning moves, but bishop h3 mate is basically impossible to stop. A brilliant game from Huebner, and it didn't last very long either. Jansa lost in less than 30 moves. And Huebner was a practical, he played solid positional chess, but sometimes he'd win tactically if the game called for it. Here's the game, Vlastimil Hort versus Robert Huebner. Huebner once said to me, I specialize in beating people named Vlastimil. Now, he never said that, but it's true. He beat Jansa and Hort, all the Vlastimils. Now, Huebner was one of the first GMs I remember who played different openings with both colors. And nowadays, that's very common. But back in the 70s, grandmasters played the openings that they played, and that's what they played, and that's what they knew. And Huebner seemed to play everything and know everything. So like last game, he's playing the French defense. Now he's playing the Sicilian. Hort played bishop b5 check, anti-Sicilian. They played this main line where white gets a big center, then black attacks back in the center, and white plays e5, and black plays knight e4. And this opening is even seen today, this variation. It's considered that black pretty easily equalizes. This is all standard stuff. Put it in H. Okay, bishop takes H4. That's the move probably Hort didn't think would happen at all. This gives white two pieces for a rook and pawn, but it gives black a passed pawn, and white's pieces aren't very active because the center is closed. So H4 is probably a mistake. Now white sacrifices on C6. Otherwise, black would take on D4, and black would get two pawns for the two pieces. So like knight takes, queen D3, knight takes. And this is similar to the game, except black also has the passed D pawn, and black has two pawns and a rook for two pieces. So instead of allowing knight takes D4, Hort plays rook takes C6. And they get this position where white's pieces just aren't very active. They can't make any threats. Black dominates the C file with rook C8, and black is the one playing for the win. White plays queen G4, hoping to play bishop H6. King H8, that's the end of that hope. You can see black has the initiative. White's pieces aren't doing very much. Pinning the knight. Attacking the A3 pawn. I've never seen two pieces against a rook where the two pieces just didn't do anything. The knight and the bishop just have no hope. And black's rook is actively attacking the queen side. Black doesn't have any weaknesses. Basically, bishop takes H4 was a brilliant move from Huebner. I think most grandmasters, if they saw bishop takes H4, they still wouldn't play it because they don't like giving up two pieces for a rook. But Huebner saw deeper than that. He understood the position. Now he has two pawns. Now he wants to play queen D1 and start attacking the king. Huebner likes the endgame because he has this passed pawn on the queen side. Now, you could take the B pawn. There's nothing wrong with it. But there's no reason to. The B pawn's not going anywhere. So Huebner just played A5. He wants to push his pawn all the way to the end. Bishop G5. Bishop wants to go to E7 to stop the pawn, or D8 and protect the pawn. A4. Bishop E7. Rook takes B6. Obviously, black's the one trying to win. Knight E1. The knight wants to go to C2 and then blockade. Rook B2. stopping the knight from going to c2. And in this position, Hort blundered, but it doesn't matter. Black's winning anyway. The knight's useless. A-pawn's too strong, and eventually the A-pawn's going to cost a piece. But here, Hort played. Oh no, Hort didn't blunder here. He played bishop c5. But that's okay. H5. Yeah, now Hort blundered with knight d3. Okay, can anybody in the live audience see what move Huebner played here? Knight d3 is actually a big mistake.
I think it's a3.
It is a3.
If bishop takes rook b3 fork.
That's correct. Yeah, and black couldn't do that if the knight was on e1. That's why knight d3 is a mistake. Right, bishop takes a3, then there's the fork. And if you don't play bishop takes a3, I'm going to promote to a queen. Well, I guess I could sacrifice my rook for a pawn first, then promote to a queen. That'd be funnier. And if knight takes rook, then I take, and I promote to a queen next move. So I think in this position, white's losing anyway because white can't do anything. White can't play knight c2. White can't play knight to d3. Black can get another passed pawn on the king side. White doesn't have any moves. Knight d3 just hastens the defeat to a3. A brilliant win. And after a3, Hort resigned. So Robert Huebner, he won with white and black. He beat all kinds of grandmasters in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. He played super GM tournaments all the time. While at the same time, he wasn't a professional chess player. He was taking languages that were unknown and deciphering them for scholars around the world. So he was a busy guy. And he also was a funny guy, even if he didn't know it. That happens sometimes. Sometimes people are funny. Anyway, there's a lot of obits on the internet the last couple of months since he recently passed away. Chess.com has one, ChessBase. Other blogs have discussed his passing. I never got a chance to play him. The funniest story I have about Huebner, and I'm going to go back to move one. I was playing in a tournament in the Netherlands, and Huebner didn't lose any games, even though he was like the oldest player. He was in his early 40s, I think. And he was like, I can't believe I didn't lose a game. And just to show you what kind of free thinker he was playing Loek van Wely. And he had white in this position. I'll flip the board, actually. So Huebner was white in this position against van Wely in the tournament in Tata Steel, which was before. It wasn't called Tata Steel then. It was called Hogovens, I think. It was Vikanze. And this position, Huebner played a move I've never seen before and I've never seen since. And I've seen everything. I'm old. Huebner played rook b1. In response, van Wely played g5, which I've also never seen such a move. And Huebner ended up winning eventually. And at some point in the tournament, after the game, I asked Huebner, what's rook b1? What's that all about? And he said, man, the close Sicilian, they play rook b1 sometimes. That's normal move. So I was like, what? Like usually they play it later if they do play it. And one of the ideas is to get off this diagonal and play a3, b4. I'm not sure if he played a3, b4. But Huebner got his young sharp opponent out of theory on move 3 and then ended up outplaying him and beating him. So he was a smart guy, Huebner. He knew that the 22, 23-year-old van Wely probably knew more theory and played sharper than he did. So he got him out of his preparation immediately. And that worked out. So, yeah, I miss Huebner because he's one of the few super GMs I've spoken to, made jokes with, and seen at tournaments when I was living in Europe in the early 90s, late 80s. I saw Huebner 3 or 4 times at tournaments, I think in the Netherlands mainly, and maybe once in Brussels. So anyway, I want to thank our sponsor again, Timon Bauer. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife, Karen. Her information's on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube. And you can sponsor a lecture based on what you do. Timon, I know your grandfather's looking down on you and realizing what a great chess player you've become. And I'm sure he's glad you sponsored a lecture on, well, what I think is Germany's greatest player ever, Robert Huebner. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I'll see you guys next time. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time with more lectures. Thanks, everybody. Bye.